isn't to look at data though, right? Our job is to use it. And using data is hard. Looking at data is super easy. Anybody can look at data and we do it all the time. But actually using that data to impact kids' learning, or impact, in the case of a building leader, impacting your whole school, impacting your community, using that information is crazy difficult. And there's this whole process around it that's really hard. Because a lot of CLTs, you probably sat in them, or been leading them, where like you bring your data and everybody looks at it and like, all right, cool. See you guys next time. It's like, whoa, whoa, whoa. We just wasted an hour or more. Because our job isn't to look at data, it's to use data. If we only look at data, we're just spinning our wheels. There's no reason to look at data if we're not going to use it. So let's start with a couple questions, and we're going to do a partner rally with this one, so grab a partner at your table. Partner rally, remind you, in a rally, we are talking back and forth. So in this case, let's use Laura as an example. And your name?
Molly.
Hey, Molly. So Laura and Molly are partners. They're going to talk back and forth on this question. Laura will give one answer. Molly will give one answer. Laura will give one answer back and forth, and we will go for 2 minutes. And your time. Everybody got your partner? Say hi, partner.
Hi, partner.
What sources of data do you have? Go. It's right there. It's on the board.
ECT scores, math scores, EOC scores. I think also formative assessments. We have like demographic data covered by like let's see, we also have data on like attendance.
Yeah, I'm thinking more kind of like observable anecdotal data from various teachers and like specific behavior data.
10 seconds. And you lulled, so that's great. All right. So let's whip and just hear one. Erica, one.
Just one example.
One.
We said student writing. Examples.
Student writing.
We look all the time with elementary at the reading levels.
Reading levels. Anecdotal data.
We even talked about like behavior data.
Behavior data.
We talked about benchmark data.
We also talked about like attendance and
Awesome.
we talked about Infinite Campus.
Laura?
Conferring notes.
Conferring notes. Yeah, that's good. Lots of sources of data and all kinds of different kinds. Behavioral, attendance, achievement, all that stuff. And I'm glad you said anecdotal, because one of the things we'll be talking about is that idea that it doesn't always have to be a test score. You know, it doesn't always have to be a test score. So around the horn, if you're at a table, we don't have anybody. So you're going to go partners again. And each of you is going to share your response. So to model with Laura and Molly again, Laura is going to share her response, and Molly is going to listen attentively, and when she's done, summarize what Laura said. And then Molly's going to give her answer, and Laura's going to summarize. Our data and information, the same thing. Turn to your partner. Decide who's A and B. And A's go first.
Okay, so you said that one of the main differences between data and
Go ahead and wrap that last thought.
So I heard you talking about how data is measurable.
Hey, Wendy, are data and information the same thing?
We tried real hard to separate them, but we both basically came down to yes.
Okay. Gillum?
Go ahead.
Yeah, we said no, we were early thinking, so what we said was, that you could have information on like a subject or a place or a person, but not really have data about them, so I might be informed on a certain topic, but I don't really know all of the things that are within that topic.
Thanks. Molly?
We said that we thought data was more measurable than information.
Interesting. Molly?
We kind of, well, we both kind of had different opinions, a little bit of different opinions, not really, but talking about how data can be more like black and white, like just this is our evidence, this is the results, whereas information might be kind of like the holes of why we're seeing that data, and the observations for that data.
So I'm going to point you to this quote, because this is important when we think about as administrators, when we think about bringing data to the table or talking about data. Go ahead and read that for a second. Data doesn't tell us anything. Data does not tell us anything. What I mean is, we do a lot of this, right? We look at data, but we turn that data into information for action. Or we turn that data into better questions to help us get at what do we need to do? What action do we need to take? There's all the data in the world out there. You can pull any of, we listed all the sources of data. We know we have tons. Attendance, conferring notes, EOC scores, ACT scores, benchmark scores. We got data coming out the wazoo. But when we look at that data, all that's really doing, it's not actually telling us anything until we take that information, process it, and decide what it's going to tell us to do. So when we talk about data, we need to really not think, a lot of people like worship the data, like, oh, we brought data, we're good. You haven't done anything. We have to turn that data into information that helps us make good decisions for kids. And so we need to think about it that way. Having data doesn't do anything. Having data doesn't give you any information. Having data often drives you to important questions and more questions, more inquiry. Let's figure out why that's happening. And this is what John's probably going to talk about because that's kind of his bag. He's really going after, why is this happening? What's really at the root here? And if that's really the cause, what do we need to do? What action are we going to take? We're going to turn this into information so that we can do something with it. And a lot of people have the misconception that, oh, we brought the data so we have the answers. No, we brought the data so that we know what we need to ask. We brought the data so that we need to figure. I actually sat with two principals in the last week, one-on-one, showed them some data and said, I literally have no idea what this means. Like, not like I know what the numbers mean. Like, I can say, like, this number is this, and this, but like, to understand it and to say, here's why we think this is happening, or here's what we do on it, I had to sit with them and be like, so yeah, here's some data, we need to talk, and just figure out what steps we need to take, what might be causing it, what's the root here, because the data doesn't tell us anything. The data needs to drive us to questions. People make meaning of data. And as such, and that's what we're going to be talking about during our time, is we're going to talk about some challenges and then some principles to think about in terms of thinking like an administrator, what this might look like. But I do want to tell you about a very interesting story, and then you're going to make a prediction. I'm going to ask you a question. You guys are going to make a prediction together. So we all know Google, obviously. Massive company. Google, if you didn't know, has 60,000 employees. I mean, Parkway's big. We got like 3,000, right? They got 60,000 employees. They've got over 200 teams working on different things at any one time. And Google being a massive, they're actually, besides being, you know, a big search company and technology company, they do a lot of research to try to figure out what in the world is going on. One of the questions they asked is, what makes some of our teams, of our 200 teams, what makes some of them work better than others? They spent 2 years interviewing and surveying all their teams to try to identify what makes their best performing teams their best performing teams. And they actually came up with 5 things. But what I want you and your partner to do is brainstorm and predict really quickly what's the number one factor. So think about their teams, because they got 200 of them doing all kinds of stuff. What's the number one factor that made their most successful teams, or I should say, what did they have in common? What was the number one thing they found that made their successful team successful? 1 minute, you and your partner brainstorm. What do you think it is? – 30 seconds. You guys got your answer already, don't you? Man. You are, apparently. Everybody's got your prediction? Laura and Molly were overachievers. They were done like with 10 seconds in. They're like, we got it. What's the number one factor?
We said that they're very analytical. They ask a lot of questions of like the data they have.
Cool.
Or information.
What do you guys think?
We said that they act upon information that they have.
Cool.
Action.
What do you guys think?
Is it like inquiry or like the fact that they can kind of direct their own problem solving?
Inquiry, direct on problem solving. What do you guys think?
We said a combination of all 3.
Yeah.
That they were inquiry-based, that they were super analytical with their questions, and that they acted upon it. Like, we said all of it.
Cool. John and Lisa, did you participate? Do you have a prediction? No? That's okay. That's okay. Actually, it's none of those, which is important because actually as administrators, that's often what we think. Well, we need to get people more skills to be better at doing this kind of thing. But actually, it was none of those things. Actually, the number one factor for their highest performing teams was this. They felt comfortable in their team, sharing their opinions, taking risks, and they have to work. One of the quotes that I read about this, they said, the teams that are most successful intentionally worked, so that nobody felt at danger of appearing out of the loop or not knowing what they were doing by asking a question or by saying, I'm not sure. The number one factor is that they found those teams that worked best together, the ones most comfortable taking risks with each other. And this is actually super important because we all went to really skill kind of based things like being inquiry driven, right? Asking better questions. Those are skills that can really, you can teach people how to do that, give them a protocol, right? Help them get better at that. Those are all important things, by the way. It's not to say they're unimportant. But they found that the number one thing is psychological safety. So when we think about that, really as administrators, one of the things we have to think about is data is not about numbers, it's about people. The data is not about numbers, it's about people. And not saying the numbers are about the people, but the process of using the data, it's about the people who come to the table. It's about the conversation that they're willing to have. It's about, and here's sort of the buzzword around it, but we have to create a culture of safe data use. I'm comfortable bringing my data and talking about it. I'm comfortable sharing with others even if it's not good. I'm not afraid that I'm going to be judged by this information. I'm not afraid that if I bring it, I'm going to appear like I'm not as good. Number one factor for high-performing teams was nothing to do with their skill. It was about their interpersonal interactions. It's about feeling safe with each other. And so even before we get into any of the stuff about data and about using data and looking at charts and how we do all that kind of stuff, we have to think about the culture that we create around using data in our schools and around our CLT time. And we have to be careful. So put yourself in the shoes of a principal or an assistant principal. Just because you have data doesn't mean you need to share that data. It doesn't mean it's the right time. It doesn't mean that people need to hear it right now. It doesn't mean that you have to bash people with it. The number one factor in high-performing teams is that they feel safe having that conversation, taking risks with each other. That's about culture. That's not about numbers. But if we think we're going to bring data to the table and everybody's going to be like, all right, cool, we're good. No. We have to intentionally try to build a culture around using data safely. So our principle would be, we need to think about culture before we think about results. Like, that would be the principle. We need to think about what's the culture around using this data? What's the culture around how we talk about data? And we'll see some examples in a second about that. One of the other challenges that we're going to run into, and we'll do a little more talking, is that there's actually, our brains are hardwired to work a certain way. And there's two sort of systems in our brain. There's one system that wants to move quickly and does automatically move quickly. Like, we don't even think about it. You don't have, there's a million things you don't have to think about, right? You get in the car, you drive home, and you can think about 25 other things because your brain knows, like, okay, this is sort of what I do. But our brain also does this by working quickly, because what it does intentionally is brains attach new information to what they already think or believe. Our brains automatically do this. We attach new information to what we already think or believe. So if we've been thinking a lot about a particular topic, we see some new data, our brain automatically, unthinkingly, quickly attaches that information to the thing we already think or believe, what's already in our mind. There's a second system, though, that's the turtle, the slow one, that is intentional and analytical and is willing to think differently, and it does work slowly. It actually has to be intentionally engaged. And that's a big thing when thinking about how we talk about data is if we are looking at data, not using it, it's very easy to throw up data, all right, confirms what I already think, and move on. Like, that's natural. Your brain does it automatically without even trying. So we have to intentionally engage the slow part of our brain. So let's practice. Now, what you're going to see, don't ruin it for everybody, Gillum, is content. This is, by the way, all this is public data. This is from last year's, the 2014, our board achievement report. Here we have our scores by gender in each of the 4 content areas. So you're going to see 2 lines. The blue line is going to be girls. The orange line is going to be boys. And so English, math, science, social studies, I want you and your partner to, real quick, make a prediction. What do you think you're going to see on this chart? Go.
So we'll take within and across here. Yes. Based off of that.
Hey, Laura, give us a prediction.
I was gonna do whatever prediction. No, it was kidding.
We all agree, probably.
No, I think, I went with the stereotype of math, science, male, the males would be higher and females would be higher.
In math and science, males higher and the others females higher? Okay, Erica?
Sure, we said we would go with that too. We said let's play with the stereotype of that, but we also said let's project an increase in both scores throughout years.
Cool? What do you think?
That's almost exactly what we said.
You'll see an increase over time in
We didn't
both?
say the increase in guys, so we said we'd see the girls getting closer in math and science.
Oh, interesting. Any others? Now let me pause, step out of this for a second. Why do we make predictions? Why did I stop you and have you make a prediction?
Because our brains do it already.
Your brains are working already? Why else?
We can surface some assumptions.
Mm-hmm. Why else?
Because the data that we have says that guys do better in math and science.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe you can stop problems from becoming even bigger problems as a preventative measure.
Talk more about that.
So if you can predict maybe that males do not do as well in English language arts, then maybe you can have programs in place for them like tutoring or book clubs, like lunch book
So So you're zooming out if we didn't even look into the data, if we predicted that. Gotcha. For this process, go ahead, Debbie.
I wanted to say, because I think when you're talking about data, it is important to put assumptions out on the table.
Yeah, and for multiple reasons. So several of you said that same idea. We want to get our assumptions out on the table because our brains will attach new information to what we're already thinking about or what we know. So it's important to just say up front, here's what I'm already thinking, so that we all know if it's not true, I can't just project back or say, well, that must be because this other thing that I think is already true too. We get them out there and name them in case we're wrong. We're in the middle school study right now. We did predictions before we looked at the survey data around grading. We actually surveyed every middle school teacher in the district around grading. Before we looked at it, we made predictions. I hadn't looked at it. Every prediction I made was wrong. Every one of them, which is great. It was great because it put on the table, here's what I'm presuming I'm going to see, and then everybody in the room knew, okay, I was totally wrong. So now we can talk about why does this not match what I thought I was going to see? And that leads to a very different conversation. You're just, oh, yeah, that's what I would have thought.
I think it's easy just to look at it and be like, oh, okay, that makes sense, even though maybe that doesn't match what you thought.
Yeah, and just another just sort of silly thing, like it actually makes people more interested. Just like I now have a sort of interest, I want to see if I'm right. You know? Yeah, so let's look. Let's take a look. So we'll start with math. The blue is girls. The orange is boys. Science. Blue is girls, orange boys. Social studies. And English. You have 17 questions. Yeah. Now I want you to pause for a second though, and I want you to feel what your brain just did. Because your brain started attaching this information to what you already think or believe. You didn't control it, you didn't intentionally engage that, but your brain did it automatically. And so thinking about leading RTs, we have to realize everybody does this. This is just a thing that happens. It's nobody's fault. It's not that somebody's bad. But what we have to think about as we're creating our culture of data use is intentionally slowing the process down so that we don't just attach what we already think to this information and move on. That's what we don't want to have happen. You guys probably went to some things. What did your brain go to automatically? Because your brain just did it for you. What kinds of things? Just share out loud. What kind of things did we go to?
Emails and ELA.
What about them?
Well, I knew they were going to be much stronger, and they were, so.
Okay.
I initially went to like question asking, like what is NPI? Like, I want to know more
Sure.
about like what this is representing, I guess.
Sure.
I went straight to the year 2013
Mm-hmm.
because ELA there was a spike, math there was a dip, science there was a spike, and then it's a slow decline for female, but then there was a significant change again in 2013
Mm-hmm.
for males.
Go ahead.
I have two questions. What happened in science after 2013 caused it to go down? And then I also was looking at social studies and wondering why isn't the trend going up?
Mm-hmm.
I just thought, I was surprised by math, but also kind of like, yeah. I was surprised by just a little bit pleased.
Sure. So when we think about creating, we're not digging into this data, this isn't our purpose or anything, but just want to show like predictions. We make predictions to slow us down, to expose whatever we're already thinking, to get it on the table so that we can see where what we're already thinking might not align, so that we can then have some questions about that. What in the world's going on? And we can engage in a deeper conversation. What we also then would follow that up with is a process to help us ask different questions about what might be causing some of these things. We also typically, if you've engaged in these processes before, we just make our observations. Right? We make our observations just so we're all sure of what we saw. Right? So math. I saw that girls were higher than boys. I also noticed that that was the opposite of many of our predictions. Some of you noticed year trends. right? I noticed that 13 saw a spike in this, but a drop in this, and a spike in this, and a drop in this. And we do that again to slow it down and just make sure we're all seeing the same thing, right? What do we see? What do we notice? So that we can get on the same page. We also do have to do the things that you guys already brought up. I have questions just about what is this? What is this showing me? You know, what's going on with these? Help me just get what's happening. And we have to ask those no matter what the data is that we're looking at. Sure. So one of our other challenges is this one. I called it just stopping at one. But typically what we do is we see something like this and we say, oh, girls are better at ELA. That's because fill in the blank real quick. Go ahead. Out loud, do it.
They read more.
They read more.
They're taught to be verbal earlier.
What else?
They're smarter.
They're smart. They're smarter. Gillum.
I mean, well, I think they're just told that through society. They're told that girls are better at reading and boys are better at math, so they fulfill those stereotypes.
Mm-hmm.
Most of their teachers are female.
Oh, well. A lot of times what happens is we see something like this, we pose that question, what's going on, and then we stop at one answer. This is what happens most of the time in our teams. Why does, well, let me pause there. I just made a claim. Do you guys find that to be true as well? We see a problem, we often stop at one. So thinking about that, one of the things that we can do to counter that as leaders is to push and actually force people to generate multiple ideas. Generate multiple ideas about what that might be. You just did it because we came up with 3 or 4 right there, right? They're told they're smarter. They're told that they're better at English and math. Their teachers are females. Maybe because their teachers are females, we pick female-dominated literature. Right? Whatever one people come up with, oh, I have no idea why. Right? This is where it doesn't give us answers. It drives us to more inquiry. We have no idea why.
They're smarter.
Oh, is that, you just dismiss it and move on? But we don't want to stop at one. And our teams frequently, because either they're short on time, because time's a real issue, because we have this blindness known as expertise. It is a blindness known as expertise, where when we think we're experts in something, we think we know the answer, so we stop at the first thing because we're the expert and we said it, so we know it. It's cool. Like, that's why, because I'm the expert. So how we can help as leaders is to force that conversation by asking them, generate questions. It's about more inquiry. Even if the answers, even if that question is going to lead us nowhere, even if we think, we presume to know this question isn't going to be the right answer, forcing us to get past stopping at one. So the principle here, along with culture before outcomes, would be we need to put process before the outcome and the process of looking at our data. So we've done predictions, we've talked about observations, but now once we have some data, we have to have some processes around forcing people to go past one. What might be some other reasons that that's happening?
I think there's, like, I think that teachers today feel pressure to be outcome driven and to be solvers and to fix it quickly. And so stopping at one can reduce the level of anxiety on your team because it's like, oh, well, that's it. So let's act on that. So there is a pressure to produce.
Mm-hmm. And
So
stop at the
if
first
you got
thing.
one, so let's go with that one.
Yeah. And so we've got one. We've got pressure to produce. We've got an answer. We're going to start moving on it. What's the problem with that? It could be the wrong hypothesis that we're attacking. We think it's because of this, so we start acting, and now we've actually wasted more time acting on something that wasn't the real issue than we would have, slowing down on the front end and taking more time to think about what are the hypotheses, to generate some more inquiry, to think about what else do we need to know, and to think about, Is that really why this is happening?
Sometimes it's uncomfortable to push past. The one, a lot of times I feel like is maybe because of the students, like something with them that went wrong or, and pushing past that a lot of times forces.
They're a really low group of kids.
Yeah, forces
Yeah.
us to reflect more as on our own teaching practices and the learning in our classroom, and that can be uncomfortable.
I think there's also there's sometimes fear around not really feeling trained to be so diagnostic. And that can go all the way back to whatever data you're using. So like, what if the data you're using comes from a faulty assessment or a flawed assessment? I mean, then you go way back to even like, how valid is the data? How reliable is the data to begin with? Because for a lot of us, especially when we're thinking about like our PLCs or CLTs, we're creating our own assessments. And so if we're creating our own assessments, we're not awesome, then it could be easy to misdiagnose what the root issue is.
Yeah.
And then follow up by, treating the wrong symptom or misunderstanding the data, I guess.
Yeah, I skipped ahead because I want to piggyback on that, and let's talk about that for a second. So we got some more data. Let me explain what we're looking at, just so we all know what we're seeing. Here we have this is actually from a middle school English benchmark assessment. What we have, and because you're far away from the screen, we got question 10, question 11, question 12. There's no 13 because it was a writing question, 14, A, B, C, D. The orange one is the right answer. The blue ones are the wrong answer. So I want you and your partner to actually have a mini conversation right now about this data, and let's talk about what Erica just said for a second. So I want you and your partner to make observations first. Just go ahead and do that for about a minute. Go ahead. What's up, Neil the Deal? Finish your last thought. think this way. And so as we're having conversations with our CLT leaders, or with our department leaders, or with our grade level teams, or whoever it might be, we have to help intentionally develop them into getting some of these habits. For a time, it might mean giving them a protocol to follow tightly. I wouldn't say forever you give them a protocol. Once they get into it, you take the protocol away, but maybe you give them a simple predict, observe, make inferences. That's a really simple protocol to follow. And be strict with it, right? So as soon as Meg starts to go to inference, stop Meg, stop. That's an inference. We're going to stick in observations right now, and maybe you be tight for it with that protocol for a little while until you can release it and say you guys don't need that anymore. Maybe you make up your own protocol where you say, before you act on this, I need you to come up with 5 more questions and tell me why those can't be the answer. Come up with 5. Generate 5. Right? You come up with 5 other things and tell me, why can't that be the answer? Why can't the answer be that they don't understand this? And maybe the answer comes back, well, we did this other thing that was about the same thing, and they showed that they totally didn't understand it. All right, cool. Now we've got some reason to think that that is actually what's happening, is it's a bad question. But even going that route, you could just say, so what evidence do you have that would say this question is faulty? And oftentimes we don't have any, or we read it and we say, oh, well, they thought this because this word was bad or whatever, when it is, with no other information, equally as likely that they don't understand, as the question is bad, right? Equally as likely without other information. So helping them probe on that. So thanks for bringing that up. It's easy to just change the test because, yeah, garbage in, garbage out. You could totally have a bad question. Happens all the time. You guys know the phrase garbage in, garbage out, like, bad question is going to result in bad data, right? So we want to avoid that, but we also, in our looking at this, need to force ourselves to come up with other possible explanations as to why. Maybe it wasn't that the question was bad or that they don't understand, but maybe it's that, and my answer key is wrong, maybe actually A and D both could have been right answers. And we didn't think of a different way to think about it as kids, as the kids did. So there are lots of possible reasons. The data doesn't give us the answer. And that's why I keep coming back to this one. The data doesn't give us that answer. We make that answer. We take this piece of data, turn it into information, and seek more inquiry by not stopping at one and pushing. Right? As leaders, we have to build a culture where that happens because it's not going to happen accidentally. It doesn't happen accidentally. Our brains are wired to stop at one. Our brains are wired to attach new information to what we already think or believe. And so without a strong process and a culture to do that, it's not going to happen. We're going to stop at one. We're going to not get to where we want to be. So, John, are you going to talk about this?
Yeah.
I'll skip it. Great. Another challenge we have is a lot of our teams think data's got to be hard. It can be as simple, actually let me back up. Even thinking about data, it doesn't have to be a spreadsheet. It can be as simple as, and this is where I'm glad Debbie mentioned it earlier, observational. Your observations are data. Your observations are data. We turn data into information. I saw this. I might not know what it means, but this is what I heard. This is what I saw. This is what I conferred with the kid, and here's what they said. I asked this kid this question, and we have this very serious problem in our system of worshiping the spreadsheet. We worship the spreadsheet like it's the idol and the end-all be-all of data use. So how we can help our teachers break away from, one, this is hard. Like making spreadsheets and organizing them, color coding them, blah, 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 blah. Oh my gosh, it's hard. But we think it's got to be hard. Your data can be, we gave an exit slip, we sorted them into 3 piles, you got it, you totally don't have it, and I'm not really sure you're like close. That is data. That's valuable data that you can use and act on. It doesn't have to be a spreadsheet. And here's the even more the heretical thing that I'm going to say. Let's say that table, the MEG table, is a CLT. Who says they all have to have the same exact assessment? This is heretical. Let's say our topic is X, Y, or Z, and we want to see, okay, so how many of our kids, and this is where the question is important. We often ask the question, so what % of our kids got this question right? Where the question actually should be, so how many of our kids are really understanding this, and how many of them are struggling at it? And if that's our question, Gilliam can say, half my kids get this and half they don't because I gave this exit slip and here's what I found. Neil can say, 80% of my kids get it because I conferred with all of them, and here's what I heard those 80% say, and I've got these 20% of kids who they're not there yet. Meg can say, I gave them this quiz, and it really showed me that 95% of my kids are already there. They brought 3 different pieces of evidence about the same exact topic and can all talk about now, what do we do for the 5%, the 20%, and the 50% who don't yet understand it? The purpose of the data is to drive action, not to have a fancy spreadsheet that we can look at. The purpose of the data is to get to what do we do next. Sometimes when it's diagnostic, you know, do we want it to be the same so that we can all talk together about diagnosing specifically? But if we're talking about just figuring out which kids get it and which ones don't, which ones need more time, which ones are ready to move on, it can be simple, and it doesn't even have to be the same type of evidence.
That totally goes back to the number one Google team factor though, because you're going to use
Yes.
different assessments. Who wants to be the one that self-reports that 50% of your kids don't get it?
Mm-hmm.
So you have to have already established that
Totally.
safe culture,
Mm-hmm.
or everybody's gonna be like, yeah, 95% of mine are looking good, and
Mm-hmm.
I got 3 kids, I need to, you know?
You have to be willing to have the conversation. It's an assessment conversation about acceptable evidence.
Yeah.
Right, that would be the key term. What evidence is acceptable to show us that they understand? And we could, now we're back to our assessment spiel, but we could have a real conversation that there are 6 different ways that kids could show me they understand this. And if we as a team can agree and have the safety to agree that here's the 6 ways that kids could show us that they understand, any of those should be acceptable because they're all giving us information about whether or not kids understand it right now.
And I also think about like professional judgment, and like I kind of think of like, too, if you're choosing your type of assessment, like you might be a person that's a black or white, like you have to give some sort of formative, like not just observational notes, but then you might have somebody that's like, I can't be black and white, I cannot just look at that, I have to be like give observational notes to where then when you do bring it to the table, you feel comfortable because that's part of you, that's part of your nature, I guess,
Mhm.
too. So then I see what you're saying, like it's really, really hard. Like it would be totally hard if I was the only person that took data this way, because then I'm kind of like second guessing, should I collect this data the right way or the wrong way? But then I also think there's also comfort in knowing this is how I wanted to collect my data,
Mhm.
because this is how I see it better.
Sure.
I think there's also that safety and comfortability issue too. I think there's a certain amount of, excuse my French, but CYA.
Mhm.
When you have, if everybody has the same data, then it's not necessarily my CLT, but who is looking at my CLT?
Mhm.
And what are they gonna say about me? So I have this solid data to back it up as opposed to actually trusting your professional judgment.
Mhm.
So I think that kind of leads into it also.
We got to not just be comfortable with each other, but with ourselves. And we have to be confident enough to say, here's the evidence that shows that they understand it. Here's the evidence that shows that they're almost there, but they don't really get it. Here's the evidence that shows that they totally aren't there yet. We have to be confident and comfortable enough in ourselves to do that. And then we have to trust each other as a team. And going back to what I said before, those things don't happen by accident. They have to be built.
Well, I'm thinking of it like, we're really talking about it as like teachers on teams, and we're not really talking about it from an administrative perspective right now. But back to like Neil's CYA comment, it is, I think as an administrator, it's really important that you build that safe relationship with your teachers, or it completely will change the conversation that we'll have if you're sitting in with the team.
Especially if they're less than 6 years. Because it took, I'm not even saying it took, there's still times where I'm scared that if I mess up, I lose my job. Maybe because I came from business before, where it's kind of cut and dry. So it's like, you still have to be comfortable with understanding that we're doing this to make it better, as opposing, oh, it's a punish you, but find a way to get rid of it.
Well, and if the evaluator, if the administrator, like at the high school level at least, the evaluating administrator is the one who sits in on your PLC time. It's like as an English teacher, the English liaison is the one who sits in on our PLC. And so sometimes people feel pressure to perform in the meeting time because your evaluator is sitting in and listening. And so I think it's really important in that structure to, as the administrator, to offer yourself as a support as opposed to a, his data looks like what. I think that's a very different.
Oh, John's telling me I don't have to end. I thought he would say like you're done.
Oh.
Okay. Yeah.
You're done.
Yeah.
You're done. Goodbye.
I jumped ahead in the slide to get to what you were talking about. Another challenge with data use is making it about people, not practices. And this we can really, and to your point, Erica, so now thinking like an evaluator, the questions that you ask can have a big influence on the culture that develops in that conversation. Right? Because if I see two pieces of data and I see like this teacher, the scores are really high for the kids in this class and this they're really low, and I make the presumption with no other information that this teacher's good and this one's bad, I can't reproduce Stephanie Gillum. But I can reproduce her practices. I might be able to reproduce what she does in the class. I might be able to learn from that activity that she did. But if we make it about the people and not the practices, the conversation is dead. And when I say people, not just the other adults, but also the kids. Like it's rotten egg. I got a bad egg here and I can't do anything with them. Now we made it about people instead of, so what we just did didn't work for this kid. What do we think might? What other things have we seen? What kinds of things have worked and haven't worked? Right? It's about the practices that are causing whatever's going on. That, again, doesn't happen by accident. We say things. Actually, let's, I want another chart. Okay, let's do it. So, growth data. Growth data. So, teachers are just numbered across the bottom. So, growth, not achievement. So, how much did kids improve? 20 seconds, you and your partner observations. Go. That was more than 20, so now you're done. Now you're done. Molly, share an observation.
Me, Molly.
You, Molly.
So I went, again, down the like stereotype lane thinking like, are these all teachers from the same school or are they from across the district or where's this group of teachers pulled from?
Explain more, because you just asked a question. What was the observation that made you kind of go that way?
The observation is like I'm just thinking of like, is it an ELL classroom versus a non-ELL classroom? Is it an IEP classroom versus...
Your brain is killing you right now. Your brain is killing you because it's attaching all these other questions and information, not just observing. That's natural. Yeah. It's normal. We got to break our own brains to do it intentionally, because otherwise they'll go there, right? Wendy.
Well, honestly, I looked at it and I go, I don't know what the numbers on the left mean, so I don't know what I'm looking at. I was like, it looks like teacher aid improved a lot, but who knows?
Oh, thank you. You said hold on. No, you said exactly what I wanted you to say. Say it again.
Who knows?
No, say it again.
I said it looked like teacher aid improved, but I don't know because I don't know.
I need you to rephrase that.
I don't know what I'm looking at.
No.
Teacher aid. What's observable about teacher aid?
That
Teacher
it
aid
looks
has the
like
highest.
they have improved the most.
Yep.
Now you just switched it, and this is very important language that makes a very important difference. What was the first thing she said?
She switched it to say the teacher improved the most.
At first she said,
I don't know why.
teacher 8 improved, but then he said,
No, I talked too much.
they, the students, improved. This is actually a subtle and huge difference that mostly you're like, oh yeah, I didn't even notice that because we do it all the time. The teacher didn't do anything. These aren't the teacher's scores. These are kids' scores. And that's super important because otherwise we just made it about people, not practices. And we do it with our language. And even thinking as an administrator, you're looking at this data and you're looking with a teacher, and if you say your scores went up the most, I'm great.
So you know what question we're all thinking, right?
What are you thinking?
Then why is it a descriptor in our evaluation model?
I didn't know that you were thinking that. No.
I know the whole state of Missouri expectation, right? But what you said is very interesting because our growth measures that we give are attached to us personally.
Yeah.
And it is a
Yeah.
percentage.
Which is part of why, when we designed our model in Parkway, we did not include that for that very reason. It has been done unto us. My point with that is to make it about practices, not people. What caused, by the way, these kids could still have terrible scores.
Yeah. Right.
These kids could still have great scores. Because we're looking at growth, not achievement. So if we start to say, this teacher improved the most, we're misleading the whole conversation. And it doesn't become about, okay, so let's talk about these kids. Like, these kids really increased their score a lot. What happened here? Where did they start? Did they start at the same place as these kids? Now we're probing. Now we're back to, it's about inquiry, right? This doesn't tell me anything. It does not tell me teacher 8 did better, even though that's what it looks like. But actually now we have to ask lots and lots of other questions so that we can intentionally make it about practices and not people. So now I'm in an evaluation conversation and I've got student growth data in front of me, and if I say, your growth scores suck, now it's about people, not practices. Now it's not about what can we learn, it's about judgment, right? So we have to be intentional about even our language, as subtle as it sounds. They're kids' scores, right? They're kids' scores. And it's hard even for me still. I mean, I do this all the time, and it's hard to not say, like, our MAP scores went up. Well, we don't have MAP scores. Like, I did not take the MAP test, right? Our students' achievement increase as measured by MAP, and that's really important because that drives it back to kids and learning and not to the people as the cause. The practices might be the cause, but we need to probe on that and do more inquiry. Right?
What's not subtle about that graph is the fact that it says teacher 1, teacher 2, teacher 3.
Yeah.
That's where your eyes go right away. So I'm questioning in my head, like, is it almost maybe even the way that we word the information that we give out? So like, instead of saying teacher 1, teacher 2, you write, I don't know what it would look like, but like practice from classroom A.
Yeah.
So you are somewhat trying to remove that person, that student.
Or even
from there.
student group 1, student group 2, like it's not the
Yeah.
teacher scores, it's the
Because I think
kids'
that anytime
scores.
you see that, you ought to, as a teacher in the classroom, you're gonna get that. And if you're an administrator giving that in, you know, bringing this sheet to a CLT, that's the first thing that they're gonna wanna do.
Yeah.
Well, especially if your name is attached to it. If your name is attached to
Oh,
it,
that's
you're not
really good.
doing anything else but your own.
Yeah.
And so then it makes you have like tunnel vision.
Yeah. That's actually a really, really strong point. Like, if you can, if you're bringing data to the table, or if you can even work with your CLT leaders to bring that data to the table, if you can anonymize it as much as you can. Is that a word?
Yes.
Anonymize it as much as you can, because it takes out the I caused this, it takes out the judgment, it forces it onto the learners, and then we can have a conversation about, we have this group of kids who maybe didn't increase their score so much and this one did. Now the question is, what might have made that difference? Now the conversation's on learning. Now the conversation is about practice. Now the conversation is about things we can reproduce that work, or things that we can eliminate that don't work, or things that might be hindering learning. You know what? Students in this class didn't learn because this one kid is distracting everybody all the time. All right, cool. Now our action is actually about how do we change that student's behavior or the impact on the class, right? It's much more about the practices and what's going on. So I'm going to respect John and you guys and stop there because I'm over time. But just to recap a couple of things, the data doesn't give us any answers. It leads us to more inquiry. Thinking as administrators, how we set the culture is one of the most important things. It's not tell people use data more. It's not make them bring spreadsheets. It's helping build the conversation so that people feel safe, taking intellectual risks with each other. It's about helping your CLT leaders develop processes to slow it down, even though the year is moving ridiculously fast, to not stop at one, but consider many possible things, and to phrase all your information around the actions that we can control, not around the people as the cause. All things we can't directly impact as administrators, but we're setting the culture. We're helping form the conversation, and we're helping our CLT leaders or department leaders or MSPLC leaders or grade level teams have a different kind of conversation. And that's where we can make that kind of impact, to help them get the question back to not looking at data, because we can all do that, but how do we use it? How do we change the conversation so it's changing things that are making a difference for kids? And you probably need like at least a 2-minute stretch break before John talks. Yeah. So quick break, okay with you? All right, cool. Thanks for.
Thank you, Kevin, very much.
Yeah, thank you.